Okay, so pleasure to have you. Pleasure to be here. You're the one technically having me on this one. So yeah, I hope that the summit has been going really well so far. I was just watching the one that you did with Robert yesterday, so I only caught like 5 or 10 minutes as I was setting up for this one, but it definitely seemed like an interesting talk. I hope people have been getting a lot out of this so far. Have you found it interesting? Are you going to be speaking tomorrow? Is that the start?
I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
I just can't make up my mind what I want to talk about.
Okay. Yeah, that is the toughest part. It's ironic, when you have some area of expertise, if someone has a question, yeah, I can show up and I can answer questions and I can talk for the next 10 hours about the subject. But to decide in advance, like, okay, well, here's the topic that I'm going to bring and we're going to discuss, it's much harder. But I do find that, like, as soon as I start talking on something, it's just like, yeah. So pick just one tiny idea. Yeah, exactly.
Tap in.
Trust your intuition that, like, it'll happen in the moment.
Yeah.
So let's dive into it for anyone who's going to be joining this. So a quick introduction. My name is Benjy Sherer. I am an emotional wellness mentor, a self-love and shadow work coach, an awakening and ascension teacher, however you want to put it. I don't cling too much onto any particular title. I do prefer the term mentor to coach. But anyways, I teach people how to master their emotions with what we're going to be discussing today, which I like to call feelings first shadow work. That's what this is all about. And we're going to talk all about this, but the super short version that I can put this into is the problems that we're dealing with, or the struggles, the pain that we're dealing with is emotional. But most of us do everything except focus on our emotions. We try and go about this in a roundabout kind of way, mainly because we don't realize that our emotions are their own thing and they are telling us something. There's a natural process that's happening here. So I'm not going to give too many generalities. We're going to jump into this. Anyone who wants, everything that we talk about can be found in my book, Feelings First Shadow Work. Everything and much, much more. You can get that. I'm going to include everything in the links. You can get it physical books on Amazon, or you can get the books on my website as well. There are some bonuses when you get it with my website. Anyways, so everything that we talk about is in there, and I might even refer to that a couple of times during this. So Leslie, anything to say, or any intros or any questions before we get started on the main topic?
Well, just first, that I'm really excited that you're here, because I do, and I will say this was how I started, is I was really bad about trying to use my intellect with everything. I wanted to try and make sense of everything that had happened, and what would occur is that I was still so attached to my stories because I kept doing it that way.
Yeah.
So then it made it more difficult, because what I didn't understand is that I had all these emotions that were also trapped in my nervous system, by the way. And instead of me dealing with this, I kept trying to understand something just to feel the same emotions popping up. And so I'm very excited that you're covering this particular topic.
Yeah. And that's exactly what we're talking about. You're exactly on point. That yes, this overthinking that we have around this idea that we're going to analyze away our pain is what keeps us going in circles. And again, like, we're going to talk about all this, but the problem is here. And what happens is, because, like, I'm just referring to emotion, so your sadness, your anger, your whatever, it's in here. And then as soon as that comes up and you start experiencing it, you shift to up here. You're trying to solve the problem up here, even though the problem is right there. And if you just learn how to connect to that right there, and everything becomes so much easier. You get to get out of your own way. You get to just, like, that feeling that you have is trying to tell you something. That sadness that you're having is like your heart saying, hey, here's your pain, please look at me. And then we shift up to over here and we look to the left and go, ooh, where's the pain? Like it's right here. Why are you looking over there? Just shut. And then your heart starts getting like, no, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me.
Yeah.
And your brain is all over the place, looking everywhere except where the problem is.
Right.
Yeah.
I completely resonate with that. I used to do that really bad. And I don't know what I was trying to find, because I would reanalyze something, come to my conclusion, come back to it. I was like, wait, why am I here again? And then it dawned on me, like, obviously you're emotionally still not connecting with this. Like, you're not actually dealing with this. And I've noticed that it's a feeling in my chest, which is crazy that you did your chest just then. Yeah. There is something, and I'm still dealing with this. There is something on, like, in my chest, and I still have not figured out what it is. Wow. I'm getting closer, but it's there, and it's like a pressure.
Okay. So this is what I mean, what we are dealing with. You don't need to figure out what it is. Firstly, and like we will keep on saying, because we're going to talk about all this, because we're kind of doing some general stuff, and we are. But you certainly don't need to actively try to figure it out. Firstly, because the figuring out of it isn't what you actually care about. This is something that we all kind of get confused about. So we convince ourselves that figuring it out is how we're going to end our pain. So we convince ourselves that figuring it out is what we want. But it's not actually directly what we want. We only want to figure it out because we think that doing so will relieve our pain. So what we really want is to relieve our pain. We've added this extra step there of let's try to intellectualize and understand this. But really all we want is to let that tension that's in your chest, or sometimes it's in the pit of our stomach, or sometimes wherever it is, to learn how to let that out. And as you learn how to let it out, you will understand it. And I mean, not necessarily, like, we don't necessarily come to understand all the things that right now you think you intellectually want to understand, but it is only when you allow these feelings to finally move through you and you achieve a sense of healing that you will be able to understand it anyway. Because most likely, you already understand it. At least, like, you know, intellectually speaking, what you are going to understand, let's say a year from now, when you've healed it and when you come across this answer, your brain is already completely capable of understanding that right now. It's this type of thing where, like, I could tell you the answer. Right? I mean, I don't know you that I couldn't actually tell, but let's say I could tell you the answer right now. That wouldn't really help. It wouldn't do it. That's like me telling you, oh, well, the reason you have that pain in your chest is because when you were 6 years old, your father said you weren't good enough on your birthday, and that made you feel bad about yourself. That's not going to all of a sudden, oh, it's going to release it. Like, no, like, great, your brain knows that now, but you're still carrying this pain. Whereas the opposite is kind of true, that when you learn how to process this inside, then this thing that you already understand is going to finally make sense. So, you know, on that note, I like to talk about, you know, the sort of cliches that we live our lives by. Things like, you know, love is blind, or I don't know, what's something you've heard a million times, that, like, you know, the truths about life, you know, what a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush kind of thing.
Well, now that I'm on the spot, I'm like, what do I know? But I've heard a lot of them. One of the ones that I never liked, even though it's true, is like, people would always be like, it's going to get better tomorrow. It'll be better before you get married. And I used to not like that one, because I know it's true, but it always felt like I wasn't valid right now to feel the way I felt.
Okay,
you know,
I don't know if that's quite
it may not.
That I'm talking about. No, I'm talking about the eternal truths. These things like love is blind is the one that I think is the best example for this. Love is blind. It's something that we hear all the time. And those words in your head, okay, great. You can understand kind of what they mean. But until you love someone, until you feel that for yourself and understand, like, oh my God, I don't care. I don't care what they look like. I don't care anything about them. I love this person and nothing can get in the way. Until you feel that yourself, the words, love is blind, don't really mean anything.
I get what you're saying.
There
Yeah,
are
okay.
certain things that can only be understood
Right.
once you feel it. So when you learn how to feel your feelings, when you learn how to let this out and let that emotion do its thing, and when you raise your consciousness above it so that that pain isn't holding you down anymore, then you will be able to understand the logic behind it of why you were feeling that way. But if I tell you the logic of why you're feeling that way right now, it's just words. It doesn't mean anything. All right. So one of the things, one of the reasons why I want to talk about, or why I do things this way, why I want to talk about this in your group in particular, is because very often in my own shadow work group and in this one, I find people asking the question, how do I do shadow work around X? Like, how do I do shadow work around fear of abandonment? How do I do shadow work around lack of self-love? Well, this is the beauty of this. You don't need to do shadow work around a particular topic. That's not at all what it is. Because when you're asking the topic, again, what I was referring to earlier is that this is where the pain is. This is the actual problem that we're trying to deal with up here. And so you are experiencing some pain in the moment, some emotional distress, some physical or sensational distress. I like to, so that I'm not going to dive into this, but that requires a brief explanation why I say sensational distress. I'm talking about sensations in your body, like that tightness in your chest that you were talking about, or the weight on your shoulder. But I refer to it as sensation, as opposed, like it's an energetic sensation as opposed to a physical thing. Like the turning feeling in the pit of your stomach that we call anxiety, it feels physical, but it's not actually physical. Like you can aim an MRI or an X-ray at that. There's nothing actually happening in your stomach at the time. Like we can point to and go, ooh, look at that anxiety. So there are times when we're feeling like there's the physical distress, which is like your muscles actually tightening up. And then there's the sensational, the energetic sensation inside of you. So that is the actual pain in the moment. And then what has happened is you've translated that pain into a thought. The actual issue is not logical. It's not about a title. It's not about a thing. It's just this intangible or this sensational distress inside of you. But now, and I'm going to talk a bit more about this in a bit. What happens is that you're trying to understand that pain in the moment, and you've already immediately, as soon as you asked the question, how do I do shadow work around jealousy, let's say, you've already succumbed to that subconscious cycle that's keeping you moving in circles, which is what you were saying earlier about the over-analysis of it, the intellectualization of something which is not at its core intellectual. It is this tightness in your chest, which you translate into, ooh, jealousy. How do I do shadow work around jealousy? So as soon as, by the time those words have already come out of your mouth and you're asking the question in that sense, you've already moved in the wrong direction. So it's already become this intellectualized notion. So I want people to understand that you don't need to do shadow work around anything. You do shadow work. That's it. And you're going to understand, everyone's going to understand more as we go through this, that doing shadow work is much more about learning how to tune into what's going on inside. Your body is already telling you what's wrong. And it's like, you know, it's like a child pulling on his mother's pants, going like, mommy, please listen to me, please listen to me, please listen to me. And the mom is going like to her friend over there, like, did you hear something? Do you hear something? That's like when your brain is trying to figure out the answer. The answer is right there. Look down, listen to the child, because the child is trying to tell you what's wrong. But it's like, you don't understand the language of the child, so you're looking to someone else for answers, but it's right there. So You don't need to do shadow work around anything. And the other question that people often ask, which is again unnecessary and is going to keep you going in circles, is how do I find where X is coming from? Like in my past, how do I figure out why I constantly get jealous in relationships? How do I constantly figure out how do I figure out why I'm insecure? How do I figure out why I don't speak my truth or things like that? Again, as we were saying, you don't need to figure it out. You need to learn how to tap in and feel the feeling and let it through you. And when it has moved through you enough, then you will understand. But the process can happen much simpler. So these are the questions that people usually start with that I want everyone to understand that we don't need to do. This process can be a whole lot simpler. So in general, when people get started with their inner healing, or just in general what people are doing, there's two main methods that people use. There's the intellectual side of things, where we're trying to figure all of this out. We're going to translate this emotional distress into thoughts and into logic, and I'm going to apply all of this rationality based on my experiences, based on my past, based on current psychological theories, whatever it is. I'm going to apply all of this logic to everything that I'm experiencing, and I'm going to figure out where all of the pain is coming from. And once I've figured it all out, hopefully I will feel better, kind of thing. That's option A. Option B is to go the spiritual route, which is things like Reiki, things like quantum healing. I wouldn't quite talk, I think, Robert, when he was talking about the vision quest and stuff like that, I actually think that's that's much more practical than I think some of the spiritual things that I'm talking about right now, which, by the way, I fully believe in Reiki and quantum healing and all that stuff. I'm not saying that none of it is helpful. I'm not saying that it's nonsense. What I'm saying is, well, firstly, I was merely saying that that's one of the options, that one of the routes that people go down. But overall, I'm saying that neither the intellectual approach nor the spiritual approach is as helpful as we think they are. And when it comes to Reiki and quantum healing and stuff like that, it's not because they're nonsense. It's because the way that I like to describe it, using Reiki to heal your emotional wounds is like cleaning a wound that's caused by an infection. You can clean it today, and you can clean it tomorrow, and you can clean it the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day. But until you deal with the infection, it's going to keep getting wounded. It's going to keep getting dirty. You're going to have to keep on doing this because that's not the root of the issue. So yes, Reiki can help us clean our energy, but until you learn how to master your emotions, until you learn how to respond differently, until you learn how to allow the emotions to work their way through you, no amount of energy healing is going to give you the tools and the skills and the wisdom and the strength that you need to keep that energy clean on a daily basis. So you're just going to have to keep going and getting it done and getting it done and getting it done. So in between those two approaches, the intellectual and the spiritual, is the emotional, right there in between. And I often say also that, so what is a spiritual awakening? For me, I describe it as basically emotional puberty. It's like, all of these latent parts of ourselves that we've been carrying around that have not been open start coming online. And to connect to spirituality, or to connect to the spiritual, is to connect to the non-physical elements of who we are as people. There's the physical world around us. There's our body. There's my apartment. There's everything here. And then there's the intangible, my 5D self and my higher self, and these other realms kind of thing. So the emotions are right in between those two, because our emotions are the first and most prevalent non-physical thing that we experience. There's our thoughts as well, but our emotions actually hit us harder than our thoughts, much harder. So our emotions are the bridge between the physical world and the spiritual world, and it is in that area where we're experiencing our pain right now and where we should and can be focusing our efforts in order to achieve this healing in a much simpler way. So now talking about what shadow work is, and feel free to interrupt me anytime if you have questions.
No, you did.
Yeah, okay. So I've got all these notes. I'm just kind of running through, like I planned out a certain, map of how I thought this lecture would go. So talking about shadow work now. So what is shadow work a little bit? Well, if we're going to take it from, it was conceived of by Carl Jung, these are his terms and his sort of approach that we're dealing with. Whether or not my feelings first approach is different enough from his that maybe I should be using a different term, I don't know. But let's start. I think this is where it's all coming from. So if we're starting with Jung's language, he talks about bringing the unconscious to the conscious, bringing the things that are buried in the shadow, in the darkness of our subconscious mind, into the light of our perceived awareness. So we're going to bring out all of those things that are stuck, but I think most people misunderstand this term or these terms or this approach because we have been trained in the psychotherapy approach of things. So when we hear this phrase of bringing the unconscious to the conscious, people think intellectualization and analysis, that we need to find all the logical reasons why we are acting this way, and those logical reasons are what are buried in our shadow. We're going to bring those up to the surface, and we're going to by analyzing is how we bring out this stuff to the surface, because what they think they're trying to bring out is the logic. They think they're trying to bring out the explanation. But what bringing the unconscious to the conscious is actually all about is two main things. Number one, the unresolved emotions inside of you. And I'm going to talk a bit more about this in a moment. But there are emotions that needed to get expressed at a certain time that never had the opportunity to, and so they're still stuck inside of you. That's one thing that we're trying to bring to the surface, all the things that never got expressed. And we're also trying to bring to the surface, I got lost. the unresolved emotions, and sorry, I had the other point there.
No, that's fine.
What are we trying to bring to the surface? I might circle back around to this. It's right on. Anyways, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. So
okay.
The goal of any of this is not to analyze the stuff that's coming up, but to allow it to move through us. The stuff that's buried inside that we never allowed ourselves to feel. Oh, right. The subconscious defense mechanisms. Right. I wasn't going to be able to move on. That's the other thing that we're trying to bring to light. We're trying to observe the patterns that we didn't observe before. This is really the big secret of all of this, that your brain, your mind is currently operating under 1 million subconscious patterns and defense mechanisms that you have never noticed are happening before. For example, this translating of our emotions into a thought, which we then try to analyze. Most of you, if you're watching this video right now, probably until I said that 10 minutes ago, never noticed that. You never realized that, oh, right, the pain is actually over here, but I just called that jealousy and looked for an intellectual answer. That is one of the subconscious cycles that you didn't realize is happening. And because you didn't realize it's happening, it kept on happening, kept on happening, kept on happening, and prevented you from ever truly feeling your feelings and from ever actually experiencing the real healing that you were hoping to experience. So what we are actually trying to bring to the surface and bring from the unconscious into the conscious is our patterns, our cycles. We're trying to observe them. And that's what it means, really, to raise our consciousness. So it's like, imagine that there's this little circle over here that represents your thoughts. And until recently, we were living inside of that. So all these patterns were happening and we were a victim to them. We were living inside that. And what we want to do is raise our consciousness so that we're out here looking in. Here are all of our subconscious cycles. And we want to be able to look at it from the outside, like, oh, look at that happening. That's a really interesting thing. Like, ooh, look at me getting angry because my mom just, disagreed with what I said around the dinner table, kind of thing. Like, you didn't used to notice that. You used to react to it. It used to be that, ooh, when my friend, called me fat today, I would get defensive. I would get angry. I would blame and judge. Now what you want to happen is, ooh, when my friend tells me I look fat today, look at me getting angry. That's an interesting thing. Like, you can observe your responses and your reactions. And when you can observe them, that is when you can start changing them.
Yeah.
So
I totally agree with that. Yeah.
The way that I like to explain it, so basically what happens is, it used to just be, someone says something to you and it would be like anger, like someone, let's say your friend says, "Ooh, you look awful in that dress today," whatever it is. Like, I don't know why that came. But let's say, or your mom says, like, "No, you've been wasting your life," kind of thing. Now you're in it. It used to be, ooh, anger, 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 defense, judgment, judgment. That's the, the frequency of your thoughts going around. What we want to change that to is anger, anger, anger. Ooh, look at that anger. Anger, anger, anger. Ooh, look at that anger. Anger, anger. Ooh, look at that anger. And every time that you remove yourself from it and go, ooh, look at that anger, you've immediately ended that cycle, at least for 1 second. We do usually go back into it, but that's why I said, ooh, look at that anger, 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 anger. Ooh, look at that anger. Like, we do, it takes practice to pull ourselves out of that. So it used to be the case that 100% of the time, it was just anger, 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 anger. Now it's going to be 99% of the time, anger, anger, anger. 1% of the time, ooh, look at that anger. And as you practice this more and more and more, it's going to be then 98% of the time is anger, anger, anger. 2 is look at that anger. Then 97 and 3, and 96 and 4, and 95 and 5. And you start switching over to this new higher consciousness where you get to live in, ooh, look at that anger. Ooh, look at that judgment. Ooh, look at that guilt. Ooh, look at that shame, which allows you a completely different approach to dealing with it. You don't need to react as much anymore. Now, none of us is perfect. None of us here in the Western world, let's say, are going to get to 100% of, ooh, look at that anger, look at that. Like, to be perfectly honest, none of us are going to reach that level of enlightenment. We're not the Buddha, and it's incredibly difficult. In Eastern cultures, they even say, like, it's impossible for someone born in the West today to achieve enlightenment, because there's just way too much program. We've learned to live in completely the wrong way. But, none of us are trying to be the Buddha anyway. So we want to achieve some level of mastery where, we can at least notice this stuff most of the time. And even when we do succumb to our baser kind of reactions, we can notice it, we can heal it, we can pull ourselves out of it as quickly as possible. And we don't let this stuff fool us. Okay? So it's the unresolved emotions that we're trying to bring to the surface, and it's the subconscious cycles. So none of this is about analysis or introspection of those cycles or of those emotions directly. It's not about understanding them at all. I mean, understanding will come with it, and understanding is nice for us because we are intellectual creatures, but that's not what it's about. That's not what we care about. And the goal is to allow these things that are stuck inside of us, because we didn't allow ourselves to experience and express them the first time around, which I'm going to talk a bit more about in a moment, to finally move through us. So I'll move on for now. I'll come back to that in a second. The feelings first approach to this that I deal with is very much a process of excavation instead of drilling. So the analysis of it is very much drilling, like we're thinking about this core trauma. So it's like, here's my surface level consciousness, here's this core trauma that's buried in the past, and I'm going to analyze, I'm going to drill down to the center there, and I'm going to find that core trauma that happened of when my parents told me I wasn't good enough as a child kind of thing. I'm going to pull that out to the surface, and I'm going to try and analyze it in broad daylight and hope that if I pull it out and if I analyze it, everything is going to crumble and settle on top of it. So I'm going to remove that core trauma. The problem with that is, I mean, there's a few things. Number one, that core trauma is buried under a lifetime's worth of other trauma. So it's really hard to reach. It's really hard to get to. And on top of it, it's the heaviest weight that you carry. That core trauma is like the 200-pound weights of emotional distress, whereas getting caught in traffic is like the 5-pound weights of emotional distress. So if you are still allowing yourself to get really angry because you're stuck in traffic, then you're not strong enough to lift 5 pounds. Why are you trying to deal with the 200-pound weight that's buried at the bottom? You're not ready. You need to build the emotional muscle so that you can learn how to lift those stronger weights, and you need to clear away all of the garbage that's on top of it first. So instead of drilling down to find that core trauma, we're going to start at the top. We're going to start with what's bothering you right now. Well, I'm stuck in traffic and I'm getting very upset. Awesome. Let's learn how to observe that. Let's learn how to deal with that emotion that you're experiencing right now, because that emotion that you're experiencing right now has nothing to do with the fact that you're stuck in traffic. It doesn't, because the fact that you're stuck in traffic doesn't matter. It's not a problem. There's nothing really wrong in your life. And the whole fact that you're even trying to heal emotionally is you already knowing that being stuck in traffic is not really a problem, because part of you believes that I could not be angry right now. I'm stuck in traffic and I'm angry about this, and I'm trying to heal because I know that I don't need to be angry about this, which means that some part of you already understands that this anger that you're experiencing isn't legitimately about being stuck in traffic, because you believe that it's possible to be stuck in traffic and not feel angry. So you know that you can overcome this. You know that the anger that you're feeling right now has nothing to do with the fact that you're stuck in traffic. It has to do with your emotional defense mechanisms. It has to do with your unresolved emotions. It has to do with all of this stuff that this singular moment, this singular event is bringing up from within me. So it's like all of this is stored energy inside of you, carries a certain frequency, and it's like a tuning fork. When you have two tuning forks of the same pitch, if you hit one and you bring it next to another that's of the same frequency, the other one is going to start vibrating, even if they never touch, if you just bring them close to each other. That's what's happening. There's a slight frequency of frustration that's hitting you because you're stuck in traffic. And that tiny frequency of frustration about this is activating all of the unresolved frustration that you still carry inside of you today. And that huge pool of unresolved frustration isn't tied into any one moment. It might have began in one particular moment. That might have been when you put the first drop into that pool. I'm going to talk about that a bit more in a bit, but it's actually tied into 1,000 memories, which is one of the reasons why this intellectual approach isn't actually going to do it, because it's not about one thing. It's about all of the instances where you experienced frustration and you didn't deal with it properly, where you didn't express yourself, or you didn't speak out for yourself, where your body wanted to cry or wanted to shout or wanted to do whatever, and you didn't allow it to because you weren't safe to. There are thousands of instances of that. So you can't find the one place where it's coming from. You need to allow all of this to start coming out. So it is a process of, from the top, we're going to start with whatever you're feeling right now. We're going to clear away what you're feeling right now. You're going to deal with a 5-pound weight and clear off the first layer of junk. And then the 10-pound weights and the second layer of junk, and the 50 and the 20. And the beautiful part of this is that you're never dealing with more than you're ready to. You're not seeking out your deep core trauma that's buried down so that I can tackle the 200-pound weight. You're learning, you're going to learn to enjoy the good moments as much as possible. When you're feeling good, great, I'm feeling good. And when you're feeling bad, ooh, here's this weight that's coming up to the surface. You're going to learn how to turn those moments of emotional distress into a moment of healing because, ooh, here's this past pain coming up to the surface. That's the beauty of it. You don't need to hunt it down. You need to let it come up. And when it comes up, address it. You know, that's the child pulling on your pants saying, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. And when it says, look at me, all you need to do is look at it. That's it. You need to look at it. The child is going to tell you exactly what's wrong. It's just not saying it in the intellectual language that we're used to looking at it from. Now, okay, I'm going to skip past that a little bit. There's one thing that I want to say. I'm not going to touch more on this. I'm going to move on to my next points. But if there's 3 words, or I usually say that there's 5 words, that if you had nothing else, these 5 words could guide you all the way to the end of your inner healing journey. That it takes a lot to truly understand them. But if you could just keep in mind these 5 words, they carry with them all of the wisdom that you need to completely master yourself and your emotions. These 5 words are unconditional self-love, gratitude, and forgiveness. That's it. Those concepts carry inside of them everything else that you need. In fact, even just the first 3 words, unconditional self-love. If you can truly and fully understand the full scope of what those words really mean, there's no room left for judgment, for anger, for shame, for guilt, for fear. You cannot love yourself while being cruel to someone. You cannot love yourself while carrying fear. That it encompasses everything. Now, it takes a lot, like I said, to fully understand and fully embody that, but unconditional self-love is the foundation and the goal. That's what we're dealing with. That's where your journey needs to start and end. So if you had nothing else, unconditional self-love. Okay? So let's circle back around. Now, I was talking about this pool of frustration that you carry inside of you. Well, one of the best metaphors that I like to use to explain what's really going on inside of us, what the big problem is, and what shadow work is really all about is, imagine that when you were a child, you were trained, or you learned somehow because of trauma, because of pain, that sweating is impolite, that it's improper. Sweating is bad, or maybe it's dangerous. Maybe, you are like, it's going to cause you pain, it's going to cause you distress. Sweating is a terrible thing. And let's just say that you managed to train yourself not to sweat. Well, sweating is a natural bodily function that needs to happen in order to keep you safe, in order to release certain toxins, and in order to keep your body operating at a certain temperature. You are releasing heat by sweating, and you're cooling your body down, and you're releasing all of these things, all of this junk that your body is using in order to turn your calories, your nutrition, whatever you have inside of you, into energy. There is this waste that's created, basically, and there's all this stuff that's being sweat out. Now, if you work out and you don't sweat, like if you manage to train yourself to do this, and you manage to, go to the gym every day and work out and not sweat, you will die. That's all there is to it. You will boil alive from the inside out. There's actually a medical condition called anhidrosis, which is the inability to sweat. And these people need to be extremely careful and often die of heat stroke, or at least suffer from heat stroke, because they can't sweat. They can't release this stuff. They can't perform this natural bodily function that absolutely needs to happen. And that is what we have been doing with our emotions our whole lives. We were taught at a very young age, and this is the most harmful lie that kids are taught: big kids don't cry. That is, if nothing else, for those of us that didn't necessarily experience, grand trauma, that is the initial place where all of this starts. Big kids don't cry, you know? So here's this emotion that's coming up that's trying to express itself. It wants to let itself out. But we've been trained, no, you need to be polite, you need to be like, you can't cry. So there's this thing that needs to happen, and we stuff it down. So we have been stuffing down our sweat this whole time, you know, that metaphorical sweat, this thing that needs to come up to the surface, that needs to get released. And if it doesn't get released, we're going to freaking die. And that's what we've been doing with our emotions. So our emotional body has been dying our whole lives. We've been stuffing it away and packing in all of this unresolved sweat. Now, one of the reasons that I like to use this metaphor is because it helps us understand that the danger right now, the reason why you're suffering right now, and the, you know, what might cause you to collapse over at any moment is not the workout that you did 20 years ago that should have made you sweat in the first place. What's causing you the distress right now is the pool of sweat that you're carrying around inside of you right now. So there's 20 years worth of exercise that you did, just 20 years worth, whatever. There's 20 years worth of exercise that you did. And every time you did exercise and you didn't sweat, that sweat got trapped inside of you. Now, what we're trying to do is figure out, ooh, okay, well, remember that time that I did 100 push-ups? Let's find that inside of me. Let's try and analyze why I didn't release my sweat that time. Who cares? The problem is that right now there is a pool of sweat inside of you. And all that you need to do to actually heal from this is learn how to reconnect this pool of trapped sweat to your sweat glands, because you've spent a lifetime cutting off that connection. You've spent a lifetime making sure that, ooh, the next time I need to sweat, it's not going to hit my pores. It's not going to get out to the surface, because if it does, people are going to see and it's going to be bad. It's going to lead to more pain. Okay, there's another example. I won't get into that. So it's going to lead to, you know, that it's going to lead to more pain if I allow this to come to the surface. So we've spent a lifetime intentionally shutting down that process. Now, all that we need to do is reconnect so that we can allow that process to finally start taking place again. So it's like, you know, we've trained ourselves not to cry. Okay, well, now we need to train ourselves how to cry again, because crying is how we release this stuff. Now, it's not just crying, it's we need to learn how to reconnect to all of our emotions and learn how to allow ourselves to express our emotions and feel our emotions and embody them and follow them and trust them, so that we can come back into alignment with who we are. So what happened really in a moment of trauma was there were these emotions coming up to the surface and your brain went, no, I'm not safe in this moment. It's not a good idea. I can't feel this stuff right now. If I allow myself to feel and express this stuff right now, it's going to lead to more pain. People are going to judge me. People are going to attack me. I'm going to lose friends. I'm going to get fired. I'm going to whatever, you know, all of those times when you're about to break down in your regular life, but you hold it in. It's your brain telling your heart, because so there's your head, your heart, and your gut. That's your thoughts, your emotions, and your sensations. I might talk about that a little more in a moment. So the pain was coming from your heart, and because you weren't safe, your brain took over and said to your heart, no, don't express that right now. We can't deal with that right now. I need you to hold on to that, stuff it away, and I'll come back. I promise you, I'll come back around and I'll deal with it when we're safe. The problem, though, is that we never come back around and deal with it when we're safe. We don't realize that we did this in the first place. We don't realize that we just made that bargain with our hearts of, please hold on to this for now, and I'm going to circle back around and deal with this later. So we don't realize that we did it. And so we never came back to deal with it. Now, every once in a while, your heart will send that pain up to the surface and go, hey, you promised me you were going to deal with this pain. Are you ready to deal with it? And because we don't understand that, we stuff it back down and we do this again and again and again and again and again. That's what a trigger is. Here is this, even like people use the word trigger, but they never really think about it. A trigger isn't what hurts you. A bullet is what hurts you. The trigger is just launching the bullet. The bullet is what we're carrying around with us. That's the emotional pain. And so when you're sitting in traffic and that's making you get really, really angry, the traffic is just the trigger. It's bringing up this stuff that is trapped inside of you this whole time. And that's your heart trying to help you heal. Your heart is saying, hey, here's this pain that you stuffed away 20 years ago. You promised me you were going to deal with this. Here it is. I'm trying to help you heal. Here is this pain. All you need to do is allow yourself to feel it. Let it move through you. Please, you've been holding on to this for 20 years. Are you ready to deal with it right now? And because we don't realize this, your head says, nope, I don't want to feel this pain right now. Hold on to it. I'm going to analyze and intellectualize, and I'm going to find an explanation or a reason. I'm going to do the exact same thing that I've been doing my whole life, the exact same thing I did when you first sent me this pain in the first place. I'm going to shut down my emotions and I'm going to focus on my head. I'm going to focus on an intellectual answer. I'm going to try to figure out what's happening, because that's your brain's job. Your brain's job is to look at your past pain and look at the outside world and make decisions based on this. That like, okay, well, this thing caused me pain in the past and I don't want to experience this pain again. So when I see that particular roadblock coming up ahead of me, I'm going to veer over to the right because I don't want to do that. So this thing that caused you pain in the past, expressing yourself, embodying yourself, being the real version of yourself, following your passions, sharing your love, all of these things that led to us getting hurt in the past, which are the real us. We are here to love unconditionally, ourselves and others. We are here to embody ourselves and express ourselves. But in the past, those things have led to us getting hurt. You've been insulted, you've been judged, you've been mocked, you've been taught to quiet down and settle down. So all of these things that are the fullest and best versions of ourselves have led to pain in the past. So as you see those coming up in the distance, like, ooh, I'm about to express myself. But no, in the past, when I expressed myself, that led to pain, that led to judgment, that led to anger. I don't want to do that. So instead, I'm going to put on a mask and I'm going to pretend to be someone else. And I'm going to not express myself. So we're constantly succumbing to these fear-based defense mechanisms that our brain put into place as a way to help us avoid the same kinds of situations that caused us pain in the past. Your brain acknowledges that in the past, I expressed myself, I got mocked. Okay, brain notices this pattern, which we all went through because we've all been to high school, right? You express yourself, you get mocked. That's all there is to it. That's the society that we grew up in. So we've all been through this. And now we do whatever we can to not express ourselves. This is the exact same pattern that also leads to like when you've had one really bad breakup and you never trust anyone again. You know, someone cheated on you in the past and now you never trust anyone because your brain acknowledges that, ooh, I trusted in the past and that led to immense pain. So now I'm going to put up these walls. I'm going to make sure that no one can connect with me so that I no longer have to feel that pain of being betrayed. But what that part of our brain doesn't realize is that by putting up these walls, you now live a life of pain all the time because you're not connected to yourself. You're not connected to other people. You have shut yourself down from love because love caused you pain in the past. So while that does help you avoid feeling certain pain in the moment, it leads to a life of inauthenticity, a life of pain, a life of struggle, a life where you're not connected with yourself or with anyone else around you. And this is, so when we're talking about the head, the heart, and the gut, we have spent a lifetime actively disconnecting our hearts. And this is what shadow work is all about. It's about learning how to reconnect the hearts. It's like your heart was connected to your head and your gut through a million different little cords, you know, all these attachments, you know, that this is how they communicated. And over the years, every time something caused you pain, you didn't know how to deal with it, you snipped one of those cords and one of those cords and one of those cords again and again and again. Now you're going to need to learn how to reattach each one of them. And it's not through intellectual analysis, it's through practice. You're going to learn how to connect to your emotions, how to stop translating your emotional pain into intellectual thoughts, which actually leads me very nicely to my next point. Let me just move down here a little bit. So there is this cycle that's been happening between our heads, our hearts, and our guts over and over and over that we didn't realize was happening. And so here's a very simple example. If, let's say, you were, if you're living with someone that you love, and you went to sleep, you're feeling good, you had a great night, you wake up, let's say, you're going cooking breakfast, and then this person wakes up and comes and walks in and says to you, hey, just, they're expressing, it's a family member, it's whatever, like, oh, I really don't feel well today. What do you think, what's the first thing you might say to that person? I don't feel well today.
Well, with my personality, if someone says that to me, my first response is I always kind of ask a deeper question, like, well, what's wrong? Like, what do you mean?
Exactly.
That's the first thing I ask.
Exactly. Thank you. I am so glad that worked well. That is exactly the answer I was expecting. And that's the problem. That's the subconscious cycle. Why must there be a reason, or at least a logical reason? So what happens when you ask that question is now the brain clicks on, it starts looking for reasons. But we went to bed feeling good. There's no reason. There's nothing wrong now that wasn't wrong when I went to sleep. But because you're feeling this emotional discomfort, we see it as natural to look for a reason. And what happens when you look for a reason is you're going to find reasons. So you went to bed feeling good, no real problem. Now you wake up and you're feeling a little emotional distress for a bunch of potential reasons that have nothing to do with the outside world. Maybe it's just because of the moment of your sleep cycle when you woke up and you're in that energy. Maybe it's just because of collective energies, if you want to talk about the esoteric and the spiritual side. Maybe it's just because your body was trying to do this healing that we were talking about. It was helping you heal. While you were asleep, it was sending up this past pain. So maybe the reason that you're feeling a little off this morning is because you were healing overnight, but you don't realize that, you don't acknowledge that, you don't see that as a real thing. So you start looking for answers. Now you're going to look at, oh, well, I only have X amount of money in the bank. And, ooh, I have to go do this thing at work today. And, ooh, this person said something nasty to me. Maybe each one of those is a reason why I'm feeling bad right now. But a moment ago, none of those things were a problem. The only problem was that you were feeling bad right now. And that's fine. That's its own thing. And there are methods that we can use to either survive that emotional storm or to use that emotion as an opportunity to heal, because this is your heart sending up your past pain. It has nothing to do with what's going on in the world right now. But because we look for an answer, we find an answer. So now we've translated that emotional discomfort into thoughts. Ooh, I don't have enough money. Ooh, I don't have enough friends. Ooh, I don't have the right job. Ooh, I don't have all of this. Now, because of all of these thoughts that we have, now that creates the turning feeling in the pit of our stomach, or that tightness in our chest, and we start tightening up, we tense up our muscles, we experience all of those physical and energetic sensations that the gut is responsible for. And now, because we have that turning feeling in the pit of our stomach and our chest is tight, and when we've tensed up all our muscles and we're breathing very shallow and we're scrunched up in our faces, because we have allowed all of that to happen in our body, that creates more uncomfortable emotions. Now you're going to get more upset, you're going to be more angry, you're going to be more frustrated. And then what's going to happen? You're going to look for all of the reasons why you're more angry and you're more frustrated and you're more upset, which is going to lead to more tightness in your chest and more of that turning feeling in the stomach, which is going to lead to more negative emotions, and around and around and around we go. Thoughts, emotions, sensations. Thoughts, emotions, sensations. Each are fueling each other because we don't notice that cycle. That is the primary subconscious cycle that is happening, or it's not even the primary, it's the subconscious cycle. Everything else is an instance of that subconscious cycle taking place, because none of those things are actually problems at all. When we learn how to turn our attention to each one individually, we're going to notice that it's all nonsense. The thoughts that you just came up with, complete nonsense. That none of those are real. They weren't a problem when you went to sleep. Your brain is just doing its job. It's trying to come up with a logical reason why I'm not feeling well right now, so that it can stay in control of the situation. Because by finding a problem, your brain thinks that it can find a solution. That's how your brain operates, through logic, through rationality, through this one-to-one relationship. So your brain doesn't like not being in control. Your brain doesn't like the answer of, I'm just not feeling well right now. So it desperately searches for an answer so that it can desperately search for a solution, except the solution that your brain is capable of finding is of an entirely different language than what the problem actually is. Because the problem is actually in here. Your heart speaks Chinese, your brain speaks English. So that child that's pulling at your leg is yelling at you in Chinese, and you're trying to figure out the answer in English from up here. And it's just, it's two completely different languages. You cannot solve a problem of the heart from the head. Two completely different things. So every time that you translate this pain of the heart into something from the head, you're going off in the wrong direction. Okay, so we need to learn how to speak the language of the heart again. And we need to learn how to turn our attention to each one of these things individually. Because when we turn our attention directly to our thoughts, then we are going to be able to see and understand and maintain the awareness pretty quickly that these thoughts are illusions. Yes, I'm worried about my relationship right now, but I wasn't 10 hours ago. There's no real problem. I'm just trying to justify this pain that I'm feeling. I don't need to worry about my money because I wasn't worried about it 10 hours ago. I'm just trying to justify this pain that I'm feeling. So now we get to notice those thoughts and be like, oh, okay, I see them, but, and I can't necessarily stop them right away, but I can realize that they're not real. So, okay, let's put that aside for one moment. You know, like I said, anger, anger, anger. Ooh, look at that anger, 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 anger. For that one moment where you get to be, ooh, look at that anger. You're going to put it aside. Okay, great. Now I can put aside these thoughts for just one moment. Now I can turn my attention to my emotions directly. And in this moment, I'm feeling anger, I'm feeling sadness, I'm feeling whatever it is. You're going to be able to observe that and see like, ooh, this is happening right now. And you're going to be able to remind yourself, oh, this is going to pass. I don't need to justify it. I don't need to explain it. I don't need to figure out why I'm feeling bad right now, because there is no real problem. No problems existed 10 hours ago, and no problems are going to exist 5 hours from now. I'm just not feeling well right now. So if every time that you got a headache or a stomach ache, you tried to figure out exactly where that's coming from, oh my God, that would be so much distress. You're never going to find a real answer. You're having a stomach ache. When you have a stomach ache, you accept it. You lie down on the couch and you know that it's going to pass. You don't start freaking out like, oh, maybe I have stomach cancer. Maybe my stomach's about to blow up. Maybe I swallowed a bomb. Maybe like, I'm not feeling well right now. So I'm going to sit down. I'm going to relax. I'm going to wait for it to pass because I know it's going to pass and everything's fine. And then I'm going to get back to my life. We can learn how to do that with our emotions too. Ooh, I'm not feeling well right now. I don't need to solve it. I don't need to figure it out. I don't need to stress about it. It's just very simply, it's the weather. It's raining right now. That's all there is to it. If it's like, you know, that same family member wakes up and goes, ooh, it's raining right now. If you were to answer them, oh, why is it raining right now? Like, what do you want me to explain to you about precipitation and how that all works? So like, it's raining. That's all you need to know. That's how we can learn. So that's one way. I mean, we can learn to handle and survive our emotions when they happen. But we can also learn how to turn that moment into a moment of healing by not running from our emotions. Like I said, that instance of sadness is your heart trying to send you up this past pain. It's trying to reconnect these cords that you cut before. And you have two options. Either intellectualize it and run away from the pain by doing that same subconscious fear-based defense mechanism cycle that you've been doing your whole life to help you avoid feeling it. Or you can allow yourself to feel it in the moment, which is going to allow your heart and your brain to reconnect those things so that you can final overcome what your heart is trying to deal with in that moment. So you can allow yourself to feel your feelings, or you can allow yourself to put them aside for one moment and know that you're going to be all right. And then you can turn your attention directly to the sensations. So using anxiety as an example, when you learn how to handle your thoughts, notice the illusions and put them aside for a moment, notice your emotions, notice the illusions, put them aside for a moment, and focus directly on that turning feeling in the pit of your stomach that we actually call anxiety, what you're going to notice is that's all it is. It's a turning feeling in the pit of your stomach. That's it. It's uncomfortable, sure, but it's not indicative of any real problem in your life that you now need to solve. It's indicative of past pain, sure, but again, you don't need to understand it and figure it out. You just need to allow that bodily function of sweating that needed to happen the first time around to happen. So why am I feeling angry right now? Because there were things that I felt angry about in the past before that I didn't allow myself to feel. And right now, those things are trying to come through me. And if I push them aside and go to my intellect again, then I'm still telling my heart, nope, I'm not ready to deal with this right now. But if I allow myself to feel it without adding more fear, without adding more guilt and shame, without adding more analysis and creating new problems and new thought processes around this, then that thing that I've been carrying for the last 20 years can finally get released. So every time that you allow yourself to feel your uncomfortable emotions without getting in the way, that's you releasing a bit of the sweat that you've been carrying around with you for the last 20 years. And that is, I had more planned, but I'm going to start wrapping it up now because we've been talking for about an hour anyway. But that is, in short, what this whole feelings first approach is about. That we don't need to analyze, we don't need to figure it out, we don't need to solve any problems. All that we need to do is notice our emotions and feel them, because those emotions are telling you everything that you need to know. The things that you are trying to bring up to the surface don't express themselves as thoughts. They don't express themselves as rationality and about logic. They express themselves as emotions. Your anger is itself the issue. I don't want to say the problem, because it's not a problem. It's the anger that you're feeling in that moment is 5 liters worth of that 10,000 liter pool of sweat that you're still carrying inside of you. So every once in a while, your heart sends up to you all of these unresolved emotions. And if you allow yourself to feel the emotions, and if you notice and observe the subconscious cycles that you usually switch to avoid feeling those emotions, then all of this can heal and it can just move through you. And you can learn, like I said, doing this excavation process, starting with the 5-pound weights, you're going to build the emotional muscle. You're going to learn how to deal with heavier and heavier weights. So at the beginning, you're not ready right now to deal with that core wound, even though this is what everyone starts with. They're like, ooh, I'm noticing my emotional pain now. For the first time in my life, I'm finally acknowledging that I have all of these wounds. And what's the first thing that people do? Ooh, I'm in a journal and I'm going to try and find that core wound. Well, great. You just noticed for the first time in your life that you are emotionally blocked off and that you haven't learned how to handle your emotions at all. And the first thing that you're going to do is try and bring up the worst thing that ever happened to you and deal with that. Like, whoa, let's start off. It's like walking into the gym for the first time and walking up to the trainer and saying, okay, I've never worked out before in my life. I don't want to work out for long. I want you to show me how to lift 500 pounds today. And if I lift 500 pounds today, I'm never going to have to come into the gym again. That's the way that most people are doing shadow work, is let's find the worst thing that ever happened to me. Let's deal with that right now, and then never deal with any of this. Even though, like, even if I could show you, like, you know, let's say we were to do an ayahuasca ceremony, let's say, and help you pull out that deepest core wound that you have been carrying around with you. And let's say that with this ayahuasca ceremony, we were able to heal that core wound without doing any other emotional work. That's awesome. that can potentially, I haven't done ayahuasca yet, but let's say that can potentially be done. Fantastic. But you still have not learned how to handle stress, how to handle frustration, how to handle guilt and fear and jealousy. So you might have dealt with that core, like even if that core trauma was about jealousy, you do not know how to deal with jealousy right now. So the next time you are with someone and they go and meet up with an ex from high school kind of thing, it's going to start this again because you have not built those muscles. So
I do feel like sometimes we, and I'm gonna say we because I think I'm gonna include myself into this so that I'm not separating. I think we can use even spirituality as distraction. We can use things as a distraction. Even the idea of detachment. I went through a time where I felt like it's all about detachment. And what I didn't understand is that I still needed, though, for me, I still needed to go process those emotions before I was so quick to detach, because that was the problem, is I was detached. But here I was, like, I was supporting that because that was the idea, was to be detached. And the result was I felt like I was always locked outside of my own heart. So it took me a while to realize, okay, you know what, before I can get the idea of detaching from expectations and outcomes and giving my power away, I have to come back in here and actually attach. And that was a turning point for me when I realized that even spirituality can be used as a form of escapism from emotions. But go ahead.
No, and thank you for, and that's, you know, what I was talking about at the beginning. There's the intellectual and the spiritual, and neither of those are where the problem really is. The problem is right here in the middle with the emotions. And the emotions is then how we will connect to the spiritual. But you're absolutely right. It's a matter of bypassing, because what you're trying to do is, we've been living here this whole time. We've been living in the intellectual. And a lot of people start their shadow work because they experience some kind of spiritual awakening. That's how it started with me. But what a lot of people try and do is they try and, like, this is level A, level B, level C. And they try and jump from A to C. Ooh, I just discovered spirituality is real. And rather than working on my emotions and learning how to master myself, learning all of the lessons of the spiritual journey and actually doing the inner work, I just want to skip to being awakened and enlightened and tapping into, you know, all of the spiritual energies and this kind of stuff, which, you know, just while we're on that subject, I'm going to voice what is probably an unpopular opinion here, and I might trigger a few people or set a few people off right here. I very much believe that Reiki is real. I very much believe that quantum healing is real, and that a lot of these energetic healing practices are real. I also believe that 99% of people who are doing them can't actually do them. Because to do Reiki is, so, you know, there's the hand movements and this, that, you know, we're drawing and painting the energy in the air and we're dealing with things that way. Reiki was developed by someone who had spent his life mastering his connection to energy. Most of us have not done that. There is a big, like, you know, learning the hand motions does not in and of itself teach you how to truly connect with energy. There are reasons why we call these spiritual practices. You need to learn how to connect to your deepest emotions, to the non-physical set parts of yourself. You need to spend a lifetime practicing how to connect to energy before you can truly perform these deeper, like these deeper healing practices. And this is something like, you know, people in the East will devote their lifetimes to these spiritual practices, hoping to eventually develop these kinds of skills. Whereas people in the West, we have this habit of, ooh, I took mushrooms last night and now I'm enlightened. Like, you learn some stuff, absolutely, but this stuff takes a lifetime's worth of practice. Whereas here in the West, we try and skip that whole middle part. We have been living in our heads. We have been living in the most disconnected ways possible, but then we discover that connection is possible, and we try and skip over all of that, and we try and go to the very end of this. And like I said, I believe that most of the people are deluding themselves into thinking that they have achieved a certain level of mastery that they haven't yet. Like, I haven't. I've achieved a certain level of emotional mastery, and I'm very proud of that. but it takes a hell of a lot more to truly connect. And now look, for some of you out there, I also don't doubt that some people have a more natural ability to connect to energies. So I'm not attacking anyone personally or anything specific here. I just want us to understand that here in the West, we have spent our entire lifetimes completely separated from this world of spirituality, even the religious ones among us, even like these are connections of internal connection. You know, it takes years of practice with meditation and with insight and with, you know, just learning how to feel our energy. If you are disconnected from your emotions, then you're disconnected from energy also. So we've spent a lifetime living in this disconnected way, and it's going to take more than a snap of the finger, a hit of shrooms, and, you know, a few solfeggio frequencies for you to tap back into the fullness of who you are. So I'm not saying that to judge or discourage people, really. I'm saying it so that you can acknowledge that it's going to take some time, and that's okay. Because when we expect this instant change and that immediate, like, oh, I'm an enlightened God now, you completely miss the point, and you go to what you were saying a moment ago, that spiritual bypassing. You know, it's an avoidance mechanism. This is where we need to focus. And when you learn how to connect here, you're going to learn how to feel your emotions again. When you learn how to feel your emotions again, you're going to learn how to connect inside. And that is how you connect to the spiritual world. And there's another thing, like people are trying to attribute their 3D thought processes to 5D situations. They're two completely different worlds, two completely different realms. The logic and the rationality and the sort of like one-to-one relationship between our emotions and our thoughts kind of thing that we think on the intellectual realm doesn't work on the spiritual. It's more intangible than that. You know, it's not such a specific thing. You can't apply three-dimensional logic and rationality to energy and frequency and vibration. They work in completely different ways, but people are trying to act spiritually without first learning that language. Does that make sense? What I'm saying? Like, you know what I'm saying? It's spirituality is an entirely different language. So it's like you've spoken English your whole life, and then you show up in China and you start speaking English to everyone. That's spiritual bypassing. You're trying to stay the same person. You're not changing. You're not doing the real work. You're not developing yourself and your soul. You're just living in China, trying to pretend like you're a Chinese person, which I'm sorry if that came out much more racist sounding than I did. I'm just using it just like you're in a different country, in a different land, speaking a different language, but you're not embedding yourself into the language and into the culture. You're just being the same old you in a different place. That's what a lot of the spiritual bypassing is. So we need to learn that language of spirituality. And the way that we do that is by connecting to our emotions, because our emotional world is that first most prevalent element of our non-physical experience of reality. And until we learn how to truly connect with our emotions and truly let them move through us fluidly, without blocking them, without fear, without guilt, without shame, then we can't connect to the fullness of who we are at the spiritual level either. So let's stop trying to bypass. Let's just learn how to connect inside of us. And it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of patience. And one of the things is that until we learn how to just be patient with where we are, until we learn how to simply enjoy and appreciate and experience the moment, we can't experience that spirituality anyway, because it all happens in the moment. So that's what we need to connect with. So let's start wrapping this up here. I think like that is, do you have any specific any thoughts, any questions about what we've spoken about so far?
I really enjoy it. I enjoy hearing you speak. I love the perspective that you talk about, because for me, it was the very last step. I went everywhere you could go until emotions was the last place. And then I had to be like, okay, let's like, you've got to face this now. Like you've done everything. And so I enjoy that you teach how that's actually first, because gosh, I'm 32 years old. And I know that this is a process. And for me, I'm not in a hurry, and I'm here to have the human experience. But the reality is If I would have just done the emotions first, I probably could have cut my suffering in half.
Yeah.
But apparently I was addicted to my own suffering because I felt like drawing it out. So
Yeah.
I'm just thankful that you really touch on this subject, and your metaphors, your way of actually explaining it, I think was really helpful to put it in a more tangible way that people can grasp. Instead of like, well, I still don't know what he means. Like, you gave very good examples that was easy to process. Like, oh, duh, like that makes so much sense. Why didn't I, And it is like a light bulb. I feel like a lot of viewers are going to get a lot from this for sure.
Awesome. Well, I really think so as well. Like you said, we go everywhere else except for dealing with that. And it's not only would it cut your suffering in half, which it absolutely, it's less than half. Like it's the easiest and simplest way. So not only would it cut the suffering in half, but this is what we need in order to live. Because no amount of healing is going to really do anything unless we learn a new way. We need to learn how to allow our emotions to get experience so that we don't keep on doing this to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to build up more emotional pain and then heal emotional pain and then build up emotional pain, then heal emotional pain and build and heal and build and heal. We just want to let this flow. We want to learn how to experience our emotions in the moment, how to not get lost in these fear-based cycles of constantly trying to argue, constantly trying to figure out, constantly trying to analyze, constantly bypassing our pain. This is how we need to live. And for those of us who do consider ourselves light workers in any sense, or here on some mission, here to help people, we need to learn how to connect to our emotions so that we can more properly sense and feel and help other people in their work. And on top of it, for those of us who do consider ourselves light workers, you don't have to do any of what Leslie or I do in order to be a light worker. You know what you have to do to be a light worker? Heal yourself. That's it. Yeah. Because when you heal yourself, you change the way that you interact with every single person, every day, all the time. And simply by being that one person in someone's life that doesn't get triggered so easily, that gives them a little bit of compassion, that gives them a little bit of kindness, you are being a light worker. You are bringing more light into this world than pain and suffering, like a lot of people are doing. When you live from this selfish point of view, you're bringing more pain and suffering into the world. Or when you're very angry, when you're carrying fear, we're all playing the anger game. Someone triggers your anger, so you get angry at someone else, which triggers their anger, which gets passed to someone else, which triggers theirs and theirs and theirs, and around and around and around and around this anger goes until it reaches one person who is able to absorb it, transmute it, and give back nothing but love. So your great-great-grandfather, beat your great-grandfather, and he beat his father, and he beat his father until it lands finally to us as the lineage holders, to finally be able to, instead of passing that anger on to someone else, to heal it inside of ourselves and to give back nothing but love to the world instead. That's all it takes. That's how we change the world. Simply heal yourself. And by doing so, you will treat others differently, because as I said earlier on, it is impossible to fully love yourself while being cruel to other people, because we are naturally empathic at our cores. So when you say to someone, hey, fuck you, you're an asshole, sorry. When you say that to someone, you brought up some negative pain frequencies inside of yourself as well, and you create them in that other person. It just creates more pain and more fear, which is going to get spread around. But when someone is angry at you and rude to you and being aggressive to you, and you don't allow yourself to get triggered in the same way, or you allow that anger to pass through you, then you get to respond from a place of love. And you might be that first person in this person's life that didn't get angry back at them. And for some people, when they are ready, that's going to give them that opportunity to go, whoa, here's this person that I don't need to be defensive with. I don't need to be angry with. I don't need to put up these same walls that I have before. So a moment ago, I was yelling at them, but I see now that I don't need to do what I do with this, with everyone else with this person. Because here's this one person who's not judging me, this one person who's not angry at me. So I'm going to allow myself to calm down. I'm going to allow myself to express myself. I'm going to allow myself to cry right now and actually release and express the pain that a moment ago I was expressing through anger. But that anger was just a defense mechanism. That anger was my way of making sure that I didn't need to feel the pain. I didn't need to let out the sweat that I've been carrying inside of me. So when you heal yourself, you change the world. That's it. It's as simple as that. And when you heal yourself enough, in general, you find a role like this that resonates with you, and you step into this role of guiding others, but you really don't have to. You can be the greatest light worker in the world and work as a gas station clerk, because maybe you meet a lot of people every day and you're just kind to them. That's all it takes. So let's end this over here. I want to remind everyone that everything you talked about, and grabbing my book, Feelings First, Shadow Work, but the book is, it's a great overview. It's fantastic. Like, don't get me wrong on that. But if you want to dive into this fully, if you want to experience this true healing as quickly, as efficiently, as safely as possible, I have an 8-week course that I run people through that I've been using and developing for the last couple of years. And I can honestly say that I have not seen a single person who has shown up and actually done the work who has not experienced an immense transformation in their emotional wellness. I've seen people go from suicidal to waking up happy in 8 weeks. I've seen people get off of medication that they've been on for 20 years. I've seen people save relationships. I've seen people leave toxic relationships that they have been stuck in for decades. I've had clients who have had more experience, more progress with me in 8 weeks than they had in 3 decades worth of therapists. So I have this 8-week course. You can come and join me. And right now, until the end of the weekend, at the end of the weekend, my prices are going up. Things are changing. I made a post about this in my group a while ago that I signed up for a business mentorship program when I started this. I needed to learn how to get this knowledge and this wisdom that I have out into the world, and how to, become the best coach and the best mentor that I can. And since day one, they were like, as my business mentors were giving me crap that I'm not charging enough, because for a million reasons, but when you don't charge enough, people don't show up committed. They don't put as much into it as they could. So
that's true.
It absolutely is. And even my clients have seen it. I've got plenty of posts from them of like, ooh, just the act of investing, like, helped me finally push through. So for the last few years, I've been resisting charging as much as they wanted me to, because a lot of reasons, mainly because, I just want to help, but like, I needed to make sure that the course was as good as it can be, make sure that it was fully helping people. So I've been resisting charging as much as they have been telling me to, but I'm finally ready. At the end of this weekend, my old pricing is going away, and the way that I've been doing it is going away. So until the end of this Sunday, the link is going to be attached here. You can go and you can sign up for the course directly online. By the end of the weekend, it's going to cost more than twice as much. And right now, there's also a 1-year money-back guarantee. So you can sign up for it, you can do the course, and with the course, you also get weekly Q&As with me. You get access to me to answer questions. You can even do the course for the next 11 months and 3 weeks or so. And if you decide that it wasn't helpful for you, it's never happened before, but it's risk-free right now. So if any part of you resonates with what I've been saying and believes like, oh my God, here are the answers, go for it now. And even if it feels like a bit of a push out of your comfort zone for the investment or for whatever, think about every moment of every day of your life that you're succumbing to these cycles. If you could pay $1 a day to not have to deal with the anxiety, to not have to deal with the stress and the frustration, how long, how much longer do you expect to live? This is every day for the rest of your life. Everything, the tools and the skills that you're going to learn in this course are tools and skills that you are going to use every single day for the rest of your life. I'm going to be living in your head every moment of every day. It's going to change the way that you see your interactions with people. It's going to change the way that you relate to your emotions. It's going to change the way that you experience a moment of emotional distress. It's going to teach you how to turn anger and fear and frustration into a moment of healing so that you can build those emotional muscles and get stronger. And if you go and you sign up now, there's, even to make it as easy as possible, for like a 4-month payment plan available. I've tried to make sure that anyone who is committed has the opportunity. It might be, you know, like it might be a little out of your comfort zone, financially speaking, even now, because I have been trying to raise them a bit. But look, this is everything. This is the rest of your life that's at stake, all of your relationships, all of your job, all of your emotional healing, all of that stuff. And like I said, risk-free. So either this course changes your life and you get to experience a much higher version of reality from here on out, or it doesn't, then you let me know and I'll give you back every penny and everyone's happy. All right. So the link for that will be over here. People can reach out to me with questions, of course, either about what we talked about or about my book or about my course or whatever. I'm available. And I just hope that you guys really enjoyed this. If you don't see the link anywhere, just benjysherercoaching.com and it'll lead you to the link for my course, at least for now. So
that's perfect. Thank you so much for doing this interview with me. And I'm also going to share again on my podcast, just because this episode had a lot more new stuff. We talked about some things that wasn't on the last podcast. So I'm going to definitely release there too. I'm gonna do that today. That way, if someone listens on that platform and wants to come look at your course, they have that opportunity.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you, Ben. I hope that so anyone who has questions, who wants to connect with him, reach out and you can find them. And if they wanted to join your group on Facebook, is that only for your students or is that for anybody?
I have two groups. I have one that's just for students, and I have my main public group, which is called Self-Love and Shadow Work, Modern Awakenings. You can find me there.
There you go. There is another shadow work group out there too. If anyone wants to join that, I might join that just, so that I can interact there too.
Yeah. Awesome.
As somebody coming just to interact with my own personal stuff,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
Cool. Thanks for having me. Have a great day.